Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Pearl & Dean's first webinar. We're really pleased you can all join us this morning, and it's great to see we've got nearly 300 people in the meeting, so thank you for joining. So the aim of today's session is really to share a broad overview of what's happening in the market, what's happening at the moment, and we'll get views from key stakeholders across our industry, so we can understand better how cinemas will emerge from lockdown and how we can welcome back cinema goers in a safe and sustainable way. So first of all, if we just look at our agenda, we are very lucky to have 4 fabulous speakers this morning from across our industry. So first of all, we've got Hoss from Everyman. So most of you will be familiar with the fantastic cinemas that Everyman provides across the UK, so it'll be good to hear from Hoss about their plans for reopening. Following Hoss, we'll have Matt from Lionsgate to have a view from film distribution, and then we'll have Sharon from CinemaFirst. So not all of you may be familiar with what CinemaFirst does. So CinemaFirst brings together both film distributors and operators with a shared objective of promoting cinema going in the UK. So obviously, Sharon's been doing a lot of work at the moment, looking at how cinemas will reopen and the activity that is going to be put in place to really promote cinema going in this new world post-corona, or living with corona, should I say. And then finally, last but not least, we have got George. So George is from Luna, which is our one of the leading outdoor cinema operators, and he'll be sharing some of the innovations across drive-in, which will be coming quite soon, which is all very exciting. I would just say you don't need to take notes. We are recording the session, so we will share it far and wide in a couple of days or so. There'll also be a Q&A session at the end of each speaker's presentation. So Jamie will be monitoring the Q&A. So please, it's in the top right-hand corner of the screen. Please just click on your questions, and then we'll pose as many as we can with time limitations to our speakers as we go along. So, but before I hand over to our speakers, I would like to just take a few moments to set the scene. So, believe it or not, it has been 9 weeks since we've been in lockdown, almost 9 weeks, and the cinemas have been closed during that time. But there is light at the end of the tunnel. The 4th of July is the earliest date that the government have said that cinemas can open their doors. Now, obviously, this is pending lots of factors, but what we are certain about is that we'll have a phased opening, because England can open their doors, cinemas can open their doors on the 4th of July, but Scotland and Wales and ROI have a different timeline. But what we are doing is obviously looking at what's happening across Europe. So you can see the rollout across the different territories over the next month or so. But what has been really encouraging is that when Norway opened their doors a week or so ago now, albeit on a reduced capacity, albeit on a reduced number of screens, there was huge demand, and the 96% of the tickets were sold. So that's really, really encouraging. And so it's obviously paramount that we have a safe environment for people to visit the cinema. But what's also equally important is that we've got fantastic film product to show that people want to go and see. So the film slate for the second half is looking incredibly strong. Obviously, we've seen some moves from while lockdown has been in place. But the big one really that everyone's got their eyes on is Tenet, which is coming out in mid-July, which is Christopher Nolan's movie. And then closely followed by Disney's Mulan, which is at the end of July. And then moving into the summer, we've got Wonder Woman 84, and then Bond, which was one of the first films to move, is now slated in its traditional spot, which is just before Christmas in November. I mean, who wanted to see Bond in April anyway? I'm pleased that it's in that coveted spot. And then we've also got, rounding off the year, Tom Cruise in Top Gun Maverick. So a fabulous film slate. So I'd now like to hand over to the first of our speakers, which is Hoss from Everyman, and take it away, Hoss. Thank you.
Thanks, Claire, and good morning, everybody. Thanks again for joining us. It's lovely to have some of these gatherings to keep us all sane and informed during this difficult time. I'm Hoss, I'm head of marketing at Everyman, as it says on the slide. I wanted to talk a bit about what we have been up to during the lockdown, which in some ways forms part of our strategy to reopen, both from a kind of brand engagement front, but also from a kind of comms and PSA front with our customers, so that they know what's going on, they've been staying informed, and they'll be ready for us when we return, hopefully in July, as Claire says. So I guess I'll kick off with, hopefully most of you, as Claire said, are aware of who we are, but as by way of a quick introduction, Everyman Cinemas are a boutique cinema experience. We focus on the hospitality and the experience around the film, so every detail that we can control. Things like the teams, the members of staff, introductions to the films, food and beverage. There's a bar or restaurant space inside each one of our venues. We're currently in 35 locations throughout the UK. So we make up a significant spread across the country, and before this all happened, we were on a well, for the last few years really, we've been on a real sort of growth streak as well. So we've been looking for and finding new locations in new towns and cities across the country and beyond. So it's been a really exciting journey for us, and of course it's been a real kind of shock to the system, as it has been for the entire nation, to encounter a challenge such as this. So I guess the way that we've approached dealing with it, of course, has been, I guess it all kind of trickles down firstly from sort of government advice, and there's a really good task force set up, and I won't steal too much of Sharon's thunder, but we've been working closely with the UKCA, which is our UK cinema body, National Cinema Association, and also CinemaFirst, to plan and coordinate things nationally, so that we're in step and that we're keeping the right tone with the rest of the venues throughout the country. And so following on from the date of closing our cinemas, I guess we've been, this is probably something that other marketeers and other advertisers have encountered during this period. The biggest challenge, I think, is to try and divide and do both of the things that we know we all do well. One is keeping people informed about safety and safety measures, and the other is, well, for us at least, it's being entertaining. We exist to be an entertaining and social space. So how do you do that when your business is closed, when people can't come through the doors, when there's a lot of kind of fear and anxiety about the future? It's a really difficult tone to strike, and I think where we started from to make sure that we kind of struck the right chord, whether we were doing something entertaining and fun like a Q&A with a filmmaker, or whether we were doing something very kind of compliant, like updating our plans for reopening. I think that the place that we started from is that, it sounds a bit of a cliche, but it's that sentiment that we're all in this together. And I think across obviously our industry, but way beyond, there's been this really positive spirit in so many forms. You know, the NHS, the fundraising, different charities, all of these efforts. I think there's the silver lining and some of the positives over this period have been lots of companies and lots of people and lots of organisations and groups banding together to try and get through it, basically. So I think starting from that point, some of the positive kind of customer comms and brand stuff that we've been doing to lead up to July, I guess mainly on two fronts across digital. We've been focusing on what we do best, really, which is curating content. That's what we would be doing if we were opening, if we were open, if we had buildings to invite people to. So we've been working with lots of our friends, be them filmmakers or musicians, to recommend films to watch whilst we're in the lockdown, and then also hosting a regular weekly watch party every Saturday night at 8:30 p.m. Called the Everyman House Party. So do log on to one of our social channels and check out what's coming up next if you're interested in joining us. And I think, again, kind of from those kind of contacts and those friends, be it distribution, like Matt at Lionsgate, who I'm sure will talk us through what they've been doing with Lionsgate Live later, but also kind of personalities and people who would normally be in our venues doing Q&As. The response from those guys has been so overwhelmingly positive to want to try and help and do something fun, engaging, whether it's a Q&A or a film introduction, or just something to kind of keep people entertained and get through this period, really. So that's been a really fun project to kind of work on. And I think strategically, one of the challenges that we'll of course have when we reopen, as Claire says, is it will be a phased approach. There will be some safeguarding measures from a kind of operational standpoint, which I think we'll talk through a bit later and perhaps in the Q&A. But also there's a challenge of just kind of speaking to customers still. And I think the more that we do that in this period of closure, the more that we stay engaged, the easier and the more facilitated those conversations will be when we have that reopening date confirmed as well. So we've seen some great results. I think if you're like me, you're disproportionately engaged on your social channels. You're reading a lot of your emails. You're kind of hunting out positive activity to keep yourself and your friends and your family entertained. And I think we've seen that with a growth in engagement across social. So we've seen a massive, even though we've been closed and we haven't sold a single ticket, obviously, we've seen a growth of around 29% organic engagement on our social channels through those bits of activity that I mentioned, and growth in email subscriptions as well. So these are kind of little glimmers, I think, of hope that will help keep us engaged and keep us locked in with our audiences, so that we're ready to talk to them and ready to celebrate that reopening point once we have that directive from government. I guess I'll finish up just fairly lightly on the operational kind of planning, and I think we might end up talking about this in a bit more detail as we progress through the speakers. But some of the things that we're planning for that reopening, hopefully in July, are things around, of course, as you would imagine, hygiene, health and safety things around social distancing, using technology where we can to either order your food and drink and pay without using cash, and pay using contactless technology. And also the same goes for all of the planning of your trip as well. So organising tickets, just ensuring that as much of that that human contact is safely operated and minimised where possible, so that people have the easiest, safest trip to the cinema whilst we get through this difficult time. So I'm sure there'll be lots of questions on that front, and we can kind of go through those, but probably some of the other speakers will have stuff to add as well. So I think that's it from me for now.
Currently around questions, there aren't any questions for you, Hoss, so exhibition's all clear at this stage, so we can move on to the next section.
Good stuff.
Yeah, so next up we have Matt Smith from Lionsgate. There we go. Still Jamie. So yeah, we've got Matt from Lionsgate, and yeah, we've been really proud to support what Lionsgate have been doing with Lionsgate Live, with the streaming that's been taking place. I won't steal your thunder, Matt, but it's been great to be involved in that. So I think you've got your last one this weekend. So without further ado, I'll hand the reins over to you.
Nice one, thank you. Let's make sure I've unmuted myself. Yes, I have. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, Lionsgate Live was really important for us for much the same reasons as it was for Everyman. It was to stay engaged with the consumer and to bring cinema home. While you can't go to the cinema, we'll bring cinema to you. Let's keep engaged. Let's keep audiences thrilled about seeing films. And we've had great engagement from audiences and from other partners over the last 4 weeks, and we've screened some of our classics like La La Land, Eddie the Eagle, Bend It Like Beckham, and Saturday is the final one, which is the Hunger Games. So do tune in to our YouTube channel, 6 p.m, for a free screening of Hunger Games, bringing the cinema home. But talking about the return to the big screen, what we have here when talking about getting back to the big screen is a classic chicken and egg problem. You know, I mean, films need cinemas, cinemas need films, and neither can plan to reopen without the certainty that the other will join. Cinemas are not like other sectors within leisure or retail or even restaurants. Retail can open their doors and there's the stock. Restaurants can open their doors and order in food for a menu, whereas a cinema, it's much more of a curated menu which changes week by week. A cinema can't just open, it needs films, and those films take, you know, a good few months and a great deal of preparation and marketing and a great deal of money spent in P&A for the distribution companies to prepare for them. So restarting cinemas will be much harder than shutting them down was. A few months ago, we simply reached for the off switch. Reopening them will be harder. You know, both cinemas and films need to not just jump together, but to plan ahead to jump together. But even that chicken and egg of cinemas and films, that's not the whole story, because we've got the audiences to consider too. Audiences won't turn up unless they know there are films on offer and the cinemas are safe. And without audiences, what's the point of a film or a cinema? So just to move on from the chicken and egg metaphor of cinemas and films, it's actually a three-legged stool, isn't it? It's the cinema, the films, and of course the audience. And if any one goes, then the whole thing falls over. So, you know, that's like the doom and gloom, if you like, but how to kickstart a return to cinema to get us all back up and running. Now, thankfully, there is, as Hoss mentioned earlier, some really strong joined up thinking here, cross industry, and we're really working well together, and we're in this together. You know, we're all saying that, and it's so true, working together as an industry to face up to this. So there are a few different panels. The first is the UKCA, the UK Cinema Association, and they've been extremely proactive. You know, weeks ago, they submitted a document to DCMS detailing 9 safeguarding proposals that was brought about in conjunction with exhibitors, and that is with DCMS for them to comment on and come back on. It was really like ahead of the curve, really forward thinking. So brilliant kudos to UKCA for getting ahead of that. There's also the BFI Screen Exhibition and Distribution Task Force, which is exactly what it says. It's a task force set up by BFI with exhibition and distribution on board, and we can you know, pass comment about our industry to government through BFI. There's also CinemaFirst, which Sharon will talk about and you introduced to earlier. For my part, I think CinemaFirst is a fantastic initiative. I think it's very unusual for distribution and retail within the same industry to come together and to work together with one body simply to promote what they all do together, which for us is cinema going. It's a fantastic thing. And we also have the FDA subcommittee on content delivery. FDA is the Film Distributors Association, and I'll go into the subcommittee on content delivery in a little more detail in a moment, because we've already had Hoss, and we're going to hear from Sharon shortly. Now, I'm on the last 3 of these. I'm on the BFI Screen Task Force, CinemaFirst, and the FDA subcommittee. So I'm pretty close to the ground of what's going on. Should I mention about research? The decisions we make in this, you know, crucial time have to be led by research. The Independent Cinema Office have got data from about 500 independent and chain cinema operators around the country, and they've shared that data. And for our part of the FDA, we run a bi-weekly questionnaire for cinema goers. It's quite robust. It goes out across 1,200 cinema goers of about 50 questions, asking them about current habits and future choices. And of course, again, we'll share that top line data from the most recent wave, which was specifically written to give answers to the concerns we all have. Top line only will be shared with the other 3 of the bodies I've just mentioned, the UKCA, the BFI Task Force, and the CinemaFirst. So we are looking to move forwards as a unified sector with data-driven decisions on how we expect audiences to behave. So, I mean, we've got Hoss talking about cinemas and Sharon talking about CinemaFirst, but from a distributor point of view, what's also needed, and our input into this, is clarity on that release schedule. We need to give that clarity to cinemas so they have the confidence to plan their reopenings. And we need to give that clarity to customers for them to decide to come back to cinemas to enjoy films again. So a lot is riding on that release schedule that you saw earlier. The first film out of the traps, at the moment, fingers crossed it will stay. There's, you know, anything can happen. But at the moment, the first film out is Tenet, as you saw, on the 17th of July, followed by Mulan a week after, then SpongeBob a week after, then Empty Man a week after, then Wonder Woman a week after that. So there are films in the pipeline to get us started again. And we are in constant discussion with exhibitions about this. That whole chicken and egg scenario I was talking about earlier, about films need cinemas, cinemas need films, that's actually something that we talk about all the time anyway. Distribution will, you know, as part of our course, we'll call up exhibitions, say, look, we're thinking of releasing this film on this date. What level of support can you give? So the discussion we're having at the moment for the release schedule is actually not that different to the discussion we usually have. It's just a lot more crucial. Instead of asking, can you support the film on this day, we're asking, are your cinemas going to be open on this day? And of course, we're not just asking cinemas that, we're asking government as well. And of course, it's much more condensed. Normally, we press the button on a P&A commitment, which is in the millions of pounds. We can't do this lightly. A good few months ahead of the release date. We're going to have to do it with regards to the reopening of cinemas in a much shorter time, a time scale of weeks, not months. But let's assume that we do get that go ahead from government confirmed that we can open on the 4th of July. And let's assume also that we get that insufficient time for distribution to make those large P&A commitments to films. Then we're looking at opening early July with Tenet on the 17th of July. So we're looking at a period of a soft opening there. Some cinemas have told us they'll be going for back catalogue films, deep back catalogue films, or films that were playing when lockdown started, as they, you know, streamline their new practices and get used to the new way of working, and audiences get used to the new way of going to the cinema. And the FDA content group is currently requesting all distributors to make a shortlist of their biggest films and biggest crowd pleasers from the last few years to offer to exhibition for that period of the interim between opening and those first huge films coming along. Some exhibits might sit that part out. They might say we're not going to do that. We're going to wait for the big films. Some exhibits will get stuck in straight away. Who knows? That's their own commercial decision. But hopefully the first big hitter is, as we all say, Tenet on the 17th of July. And if all that happens, I think what we'll see then is moving very quickly from the short-term planning, that sort of like quicker decision making that I've been mentioning earlier, of the films that are coming out immediately, to more medium-term planning, looking at more releases coming back onto the calendar. We all saw how films came off the schedule. They'll start to come back onto the calendar for Q3 and Q4. But that depends on audiences coming back. Now, with the audiences, I don't think we're quite there just yet. There was a piece published in the Financial Times last week that said that it was asking customers about their likelihood of engaging with certain leisure activities, like going to the restaurant or going shopping or going to the cinema. And the cinema is still fairly low, and it hadn't changed since a month ago when they previously asked that question. I think it's primarily because of two things. The audiences may have concerns over safety, or because they just don't know that films are open yet. But I do think that response from audiences will change positively with time as they hear about cinemas are reopening, as they see the safeguarding for themselves, and there is a lot of safeguarding, as they see the film choices on offer, and they are some cracking films, and as they see that the industry as a whole has risen to the challenge of making those plans. And what the industry is doing now is communicating those plans, that cinemas are opening, that they're safe, that there's new films to see to an audience. And it's crucial that we get that messaging right, that we get that messaging out to consumers as strongly as we possibly can, because we're not going to get a second chance at landing this. We have to get that messaging spot on. And that messaging is in the extremely capable hands of Sharon from CinemaFirst, and I know she's speaking next, so I don't mind handing over to her.
Thanks, Matt.
There's a few questions come through just as while we've got them coming through. A couple around theatre release and then moving to content services. People are asking, will there be what will happen to the window between films in cinemas and then go into a shorter window between releasing onto VOD and content services? And is there the opportunity for films that have been released directly to VOD to then return to the big screen in the opposite direction? If anyone wants to take one.
Windowing is a discussion that has been going on non-stop for well over 15-20 years. That's not going to change. The dynamics of that discussion might change, and I think we all have to listen to consumers and what consumers demand. Any industry that doesn't is foolish. We have to listen to what consumers want and how they want to consume films. So I think the discussion on windowing will continue, but it will be slightly different going forward. As for films that have been released on VOD coming back to cinemas, that is an individual decision for the cinema chains themselves. I'm sure the distributors will offer them, but it's up to the cinemas if they play them or not.
I think just to chime in there as well, I think that sort of early phase that Matt was talking about in early July, hopefully when we get the green light to reopen during that period, I think you will see a lot of creativity happening at that point and coming up with different ideas to bring films from a back catalogue, films that have maybe appeared online but haven't found the audience that they would have done if they had have had a full theatrical release. I think you will see some interesting creativity during that period as we kind of mount and grow and garner our audiences back for those tentpole releases that Matt was talking about as well. So I think you will see a bit of it. I think we've seen a bit of it pre-lockdown, as Matt says as well. There is some small kind of experiments happening, but by and large we rely on amazing filmmakers showing their incredible content in the best format, which is a big screen, and that's going to be the true the true return to cinema going as we have known it and loved it through the ages. So that's the bit we're really looking forward to.
And then just one other question I got was, well, quite a few come through around about capacity in cinema auditoriums. Obviously, with social distancing measures being put in place, how will this affect admissions and attendances going forward? Will there be a longer shelf life for films to be running longer and in the cinemas as a whole?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in on this one as well. So I think there'll be probably controls of two sorts when we first reopen, and those will be both around space around the individual or individual groups from the same household. So as cinemas and venues, we've all got very different spaces. I'm sure you'll be aware of multi-thousand seater screens that exist in different venues, all the way down to really small, intimate little screens that some of the operators have as well. So there will need to be some different arrangements put in place to ensure that you have the same social distancing experience across those types of venues. But that's one way. I think the other way as well, which will certainly make it easier and more comfortable to test the water, will be planning a bit of extra space between those showings as well. So you'll see, I mean, hopefully it won't be something that as you as an audience member would necessarily notice, but as an operator we'll have a bit of extra buffer space between those screen times, so that extra cleaning, extra space between customers can kind of come in and get out as well. In terms of the knock-on effect to release schedules, I mean, it's a really unique industry to be honest. I think we are experts at doing that anyway, and as Matt said, it's this kind of cyclical thing that films need audiences. So when a film's playing well, you will see it play for 16 weeks, and when a film's had a great, amazing opening weekend but is then tailing off a bit quickly or a bit quicker, you will see it playing less. Our whole industry is based on that flexibility and that decision making every single week. So I think that process, it might be nuanced by audiences wanting to see a film for a longer period, So yeah, it might have an impact, but I think we're already kind of really well versed in working in that kind of environment anyway.
Brilliant.
Are there any more questions, Jamie?
I'm just filtering through them all, so I'm trying to match them into because they're all quite similar on the occasion. So I'm trying to pull them together, and then I'll ask some more after Sharon's section.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Hoss and Sharon. If we could hand over to you, please.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Delightful to be here. Thank you to Pearl and Dean. So as it says there, I work for CinemaFirst, and we are a kind of cross-industry body looking at driving cinema going. And in my normal day job, I run the industry partnership with CompareTheMarket.com and Meerkat Movies. And I think we kind of know how we got here. I think life, as we all knew it, went chucked out the window in the middle of March, and it had significant impact on every single sector. And as Matt and as Hoss have said, and I spend quite a lot of time with them, so we obviously know each other quite well. I think as an industry, we quickly understood that we needed to align and agree our game plan as a sector. The dialogue was changing daily. There was hysteria and uncertainty, and actually we needed to clamp down on that and really understand what the story was going to be. We also wanted to have the opportunity to learn from other markets, and the one thing about this pandemic is that different sectors of the world have been affected by the pandemic at different times, and as such, therefore, they're emerging from the pandemic at different times. So there are some learnings there in terms of what worked well, what they thought they could do, what we might need to do to moderate. So we're really looking at that. And we wanted to really make sure that we wrote our own story. The sector wrote its own story for going back to cinema. So that's our starting point. As Matt says, you know, CinemaFirst is actually quite a unique body, but what this pandemic did was bring the industry together in a way that it's never done before, in a very proactive way to actually think, what will our back to cinema plan be? So I just want to give you a brief update really on some of the things we're doing at CinemaFirst with our cross-functional teams to really start developing that back to cinema approach. In short, we all recognise it's about three key things. It's about safety, it's about reassurance, and it's about credibility. And whatever cinemas do, as has been said significantly on this call already, is that whatever happens, opening will be about phased opening, and it's going to happen over an extended period of time. What we need to do, though, in any activity is reassure cinema goers that cinemas are safe spaces. Ultimately, talk about the big screen and remind them what they love about going to the cinema and that shared experience. And when it's right, is to have a really big, broad, splashy, we're back, we're open, and look what's on screen. We've got a number of work streams at CinemaFirst which are really all working into a central point to deliver this, and I'm going to just quickly top line the four key areas, but I just want to specifically talk about insights on this call because I think that's really where we're going to get a lot of value initially. So the first one is insights and analysis. The second one is communications and marketing. The next, as Hoss and Matt have talked about, is safeguarding, and finally content. And all these things really need insights to really govern our tonality, our frequency, and importantly, our understanding of what consumers and cinema goers are feeling. It's almost like we as a sector want to have and be able to understand what that safety endorsement will be going forward for people going to the cinemas. We need to get it right. We've kind of got one shot. I almost feel an Eminem song coming on here, but I'm not going to sing to you. But we do need to make sure that we understand the concerns of cinema goers and we prioritise those concerns accordingly. We can't just say, yeah, you're worried, it'll be okay. We need to understand it and we need to work to addressing those. We also need to understand people's expectations. What do they think cinema post-COVID or mid-COVID or coming out the other side of COVID will be like. And I think for us as a group, we need to understand which audiences are more likely to return to cinemas more quickly than others, and what those audiences' expectations are. And ultimately, all of these things will go into the melting pot to look at the impacts on programming and film content. So just to give you a little more detail, as Matt said, you know, we're all dreaming of being out post COVID lockdown. But one thing we need to understand is what are consumers' appetite to go back to cinema, and where does that sit, you know, vis-a-vis other things so that you might want to do, the gym, the pub, bars, you know, gigs, etc., etc. Where does cinema stack up? As I've said, which groups of people will be likely to come back to cinema more quickly, more readily. And I think it's an understanding as well that actually as we've moved through this journey, things have changed. And there's a combination of things. It's not just desire. It's also going to be about people's spending power. Have they been furloughed? Will they be retained by their companies? Will they sadly be made redundant? And what effect that has on their desire to be out and about? And also, what level of safety do they need to be reassured about being safe in such public venues? I think once we've done the insights, so the insights are, as Matt said, we commissioned the first wave on May the 11th, and we're going to get a full debrief next week, which is very exciting. Very exciting. But what we will understand is what positive messages are more likely to stimulate desire to go back to the cinema, what kinds of messaging and frequency of messaging might people need around reassurance, and also can we meet their expectations? What do people expect now? You know, I mean, I don't know about you, but as soon as I walk through a cinema and I'm in my seat, I'm literally just dreaming of troughing into my amazing bucket of popcorn. I like popcorn. But you know, what will that be like? And how, as we progress through the situation, does their desire and their optimism change? So I think we will be very, very well placed to have a real understanding of what people expect, how to target our messaging, how to woo, in inverted commas, particular audiences to come back. The great thing about our insights, though, is it's not just a one-stop shop. We will be conducting waves of research every 2 weeks for 2 months. And if there is a significant change, we can accelerate that by doing weekly dips. So I think we are really, really well placed to be communicating on behalf of the sector. And yes, the 4th of July is the earliest date that cinemas might reopen. How many will open at that date, we don't know. But what we do know is that actually with the work that's happening at the UK Cinema Association and the FDA and CinemaFirst, I think audiences will be feeling pretty content and safe in cinemas because we will have been instructing them. So that's my short update. But if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Sharon, across the board as such. Audiences, then obviously you mentioned about the audiences being wary about coming back and the sort of measures are being put in place. When do we foresee to get that sort of information through, and is that research available to everybody?
So in the first instance, we will be making the research available to members of the UKCA and the FDA, and membership of the UKCA, I think it's about 94% of the UK cinema population, and we will just have a look and consider how we get it out to a wider group. So that's a question that's come up before. So we're definitely we'll have to get back to you on that one.
Okay. Another question asked around do you foresee chains such as Odeon, Cineworld View evolving their programming more widely to individual cinemas, given Matt's point about being on an individual basis?
I can't really comment on what they're specifically going to do, but I think given the fact that there is going to be a broad range of content, both back catalogue and new releases, I think there is every possibility that they may broaden their programming, but I can't comment specifically on that.
Cool.
I'll just jump in on that one, Jamie.
Yeah.
I think, you know, just again to paint a sort of broader picture, because one of the things that I think the CinemaFirst strategy is helping with is that there is a really crucial point, and there is that Eminem moment, to quote you, Sharon. You know, when we first reopen, and we have to get that right. But also, you know, you look at the sort of recent times and recent history of cinema going. We've just come off the back of 2 record-breaking years. We've seen more audiences and bigger box offices than we've seen in a generation. So I think we're also playing a long game here, and there will be some experimentation in programming. There will continue to be flexibility in content and how long that film plays at that cinema on that particular screen, and we will be being a little bit cautious. So I think don't be surprised if you see things being tried, rolled forward a little bit, rolled backward a little bit, expanded through the networks. You know, Matt alluded to there'll perhaps be a certain number of cinemas open on day one, and then we'll see a further rollout from there. I think we've got to be careful. We've got to play the long game, because we've got this kind of treasured thing here, and I think for everybody on this conference, I think it's also this treasured piece of media. It's this really unique way of speaking to customers that is so rare in today's environment. So I think we've got to be careful with it, and we've got to play that kind of long game, and to get back to where we were, and that's the same for the rest of the country and every other industry out there. So it's going to be a long-term kind of challenge.
And as an industry, you asked if it were to happen, if we were to suddenly go back into a second wave and lockdown, how would cinemas react to that situation, and what would they do in that point?
I'd be really sad. Is the first point. I think, you know, it's funny. I guess the priority at the moment is this way bigger challenge that the country is facing. It's around public health and people's safety. I think that has got to come first before anything else. You know, everything else kind of ripples out from that first concern. So of course we would be sad, but as mentioned, we've kind of got this really long legacy as a media. We've had this amazing renaissance in the past few years, and that we've all been lucky to be a part of it. It hasn't happened in every single territory across the globe, but there are lots of territories showing incredible growth. So I think, you know, to an extent, if we had to close again, it would be the right decision if we had to do it. So you can't, it's difficult. It's a long time, you know, as Claire mentioned at the top of the call, it's been 9 weeks, which I can't believe. It's kind of flown by, but I don't think there's any frustration beyond wanting the rest of the world to be back to normal as well, or at least some form of new normal. So yeah, it would be sad, but also I wouldn't be massively surprised if there are other changes, you know, whether it's this winter or in 5 years' time. I think we're going to have to kind of engage with this new challenge, really, and just kind of try and keep nurturing what we've got, because we know it's something that people love when it's safe to do so.
Yep. Okay. As I say, we've got quite a few questions on here, and if we can't get through them all, we'll try and return them, reply to them all individually at the end of the session.
Great. Thank you, Horst. Thank you, everyone, for answering the questions. So our final, last but not least, we've got George, and we've been having some questions coming through about, you know, drive-in and outdoor, and you know, what can be done in this space. So that's quite a nice tee up for George. So I'll just hand you over to George to talk us through outdoor and drive-in. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Yeah, so I'm George Wood. I run the Lunar Cinema, and we have traditionally specialised in outdoor screenings. But what I want to talk to you today about is we've been doing during the 9 weeks of lockdown, pivoting into drive-in cinema particularly, and the crucial role that I believe drive-in can now play in the wider industry returning to what we all know and love. By way of a bit of background, where you can see on the screen, a classic film on a big screen in an incredible setting is what we've specialised in, and it's been 12 years that we've been rolling this model out. When we first started, I just made a list of all the most interesting, prestigious and aesthetically beautiful backdrops in the country, and basically set about winning them over and putting screens in. And so it came about that we came to specialise, therefore, in sites of real sensitivity, spaces that you'd never actually believe we could put a cinema event in, either because of their historical sensitivity, like Warwick Castle you can see there, or because of their resident proximity, such as at Kensington Palace, where the royal household are literally a stone's throw from our big screen, and we exist by not pissing them off, basically. One of the key elements was our ability to find this highly communal, social experience felt sufficiently different to going to a fixed location cinema, so that A, people would do both and see them as sufficiently different experiences never to cannibalise the other, and B, that crucially it meant that we could exist harmoniously in that wider industry of established exhibitors. And indeed, over the years, I've been pleasantly surprised by how closely we've worked with many of the exhibitors, and never been seen as competition in that respect, either through kind of promotional screenings or even mini seasons. And it's our ability to kind of rub along with the exhibitors that was, I think, based on the fact that the experience was so different, as you can see in the image. The fact that the majority of our business is obviously open air, as you can see, so hence in the summer when traditionally cinemas weren't at their busiest, but also that huge importance was laid on the fact that the films that we found would play best in our format tended to be classics and not new. It's weird, that shared experience and the sociable nature of the event gave rise to our programming, therefore leaning on the titles that people had seen countless times before. So every year we'd program those, as well as obviously the big award winners or the talked out films of the year, whether it's back as far as The Artist or right the way through to La La Land and Showman, of course, and Bohemian Rhapsody last year. The new release, usually one or two, bucks that trend, but actually open air cinema and these communal shared experience cinemas tend to rely best on the classics: Grease, Dirty Dancing, Top Gun, you name it. And this, I believe, the fact that putting these screenings on meant that we could coexist in the industry quite nicely, and also the fact that obviously putting events on summertime comes with inherent challenges, not least the bloody weather. Sometimes obviously it's risky, limited return, so for that reason, if you have a wet summer, yeah, we suffer. So it's allowed us to find our little place, our little niche in the industry. And as open air cinema grew in the UK, we marked our territory by basically the only two ways that we could. We got all the best venues and secured them, and then increased the scale so that we could operate on a nationwide level, where we now run over 175 screenings each year at around 60 different sites, and at the same time invested heavily in the kit so that we could have better sound and visuals than those who are entering the pop-up market, which always attracts people each year to give it a go. And my belief, really, looking at this experience that we've now done for 12 years, and what it shows me, the insight I have, is that people will always want a communal shared experience when it comes to cinema. And it's simply because it counts more to them than the individual one. And we've seen this even in lockdown, where people have access to infinite titles and streaming platforms. They actually still want to go online and do what Matt and Lionsgate have done. They actually want to sit and watch a film together, where they can feel the presence, albeit down a Wi-Fi connection, of other people. And so that's why I'm so confident that the shared experience isn't going away, both with fixed location cinema and outdoor cinema. I think they will return. But look, in the meantime, we have had to embrace a new form of cinema, and that is the drive-in format. So the move to drive-in, I have to say, being completely honest, is largely a response to how popular it's proved to be all across the world in other territories. Universally, I think drive-in is now seen to be the gateway back to out-of-home entertainment after lockdown. Not only is it the first thing that governments usually permit to take place, but almost as importantly, it's the thing that people feel most confident doing after they've been sat in their house for 9 weeks, as you can imagine. Ironically, for the last 12 years, I've been quite dismissive of drive-in as a format, always saying that no, it lacks the social, the communal elements of our outdoor events. People feel in their cars like they're distanced from their fellow audience members, isolated in their cars. Forward to 2020, it's exactly the form of cinema that is right to win this audience back, and it's now I can clearly see the perfect thing that we should be doing, and we're fortunate that we can pivot in this way. So whilst we're confident that our outdoor screenings will return and that will be our core business again, because I do know with outdoor we can incorporate social distancing measures, we can do that without diluting the experience or ruining the viability from a commercial perspective. But from the moment, drive-in, I believe, offers that confidence-winning platform that we all require right now, that shield that the audience from which they can watch will, I believe, get people to attend who have been too scared by watching the news at 10 every night over the last 9 weeks to step foot in the theatre for a while. So that's why I think that drive-in is the solution right now. It will be the confidence boosting gateway back to all forms of entertainment, I believe, not just cinema. And it will act as a public service to all those people who are just itching, like me, to get out their houses again and have a shared communal experience, the return of the big screen, as we're talking about. It's a service that I believe that the wider entertainment industry, as much as a service to film fans, will benefit from. And I really believe that we have that responsibility to show people that it's safe to venture out, that they can come back to cinema. And hopefully they will come to a drive-in, they'll have a great time, go and tell their friends, come back to open air cinema and traditional cinema more quickly with that confidence that we all know is going to have to return. Just quickly on drive-in, in terms of how we actually present it, I'm very aware that novelty plays a huge role in drive-in, but at the same time, we've got to bring it up to date. This has to be a good cinema experience. Win back. So we've basically spent the last 10 weeks working out how to do it. And there are a few reasons why I was a bit down on it. Not just that I felt that it was socially distanced, which is, we've ticked that box now as something that we do require, but equally the sound was always an issue for me. Relaying the sound through an FM frequency always felt to me like one of those novelty nostalgia things that in reality was a pain in the arse to do and rewarded you with pretty poor quality sound. The fact that modern cars aren't always easy to tune to a specific frequency and they turn themselves off after a certain period of time to save the battery anyway, always felt like there must be a better solution. So we've basically spent lockdown working with our sound partners on a wireless full frequency speaker. You can see it there in the image actually, that sits on the dashboard, offers better sound than you'd get from an FM frequency. The boxes can be fully disinfected between each screening. They're collected on arrival, so fully social distanced again. And obviously, and when you receive them, the pre-film audio is already playing, so they're totally user-friendly for the audience, as opposed to people twiddling their knobs and then having to call us over. A steward can't then go into the car and say, just press that button there. We have to maintain this social distancing that's so important at the experience. So we've basically gone through every aspect of the event to make sure that we can always comply with social distancing, from the queuing and the ticket scanning through to the collection of food and drink being done remotely, through to even if people do require the toilet, it's all socially distanced. But this improvement in the sound transmission, I think, is what will allow us to bring drive-in into the 21st century and convince everybody, not least the film studios, that we can present their films in a way that will win the audience back. So that's kind of what we're looking to do while still embracing the nostalgia of the form that people want. I fully get that drive-in the UK is a full novelty, and I'm the first to admit that we're embracing it as due to its social potentials. But what I've seen over the last few weeks of working on it, I've totally changed my tune about the merits of it, and I can now see a future whereby we might run drive-in every year in the future without the need of a global pandemic to push us into it. The truth is that the financials don't work particularly well. A car takes up 6 times the space of a person, and we can't charge 6 times the ticket price, as you can imagine. But this isn't about making a quick buck. This is about something much more important. It's about offering a service to film fans who are itching to get back to the big screen, and hopefully a gateway to a mass audience to build their confidence, to get the return to the big screen that we all want. And that actually covers cinema, theatre, opera, you name it. Drive-in can actually be the tool that gets people back. And if of course we are the first to return ahead of Everyman and as Hoss was saying, we have that real industry. We have to do it safely and we have to do it well, and the two are equally important, I believe. Has to be a way that serves the wider industry by winning people back. And it's one of the things over the last few weeks I've been so pleased with dealing with the distributors. Filmbank in particular, I speak to all the time, have been brilliant in having a measured response, seeing that there is this sense of responsibility that we have, putting the screenings on well, actually making sure that the existing providers are the first to be dealt with, and stopping people from who might just be throwing a screen up and trying to make a quick buck. There's something much more important at play here than that. I think that Sharon touched on it. There are three audiences. The audience who are ready to go now, who are looking out the window right this minute saying, I wish I was at a Luna screening in the park. Those are going to be easy. We'll win those back easily for you. Two is that audience who are going to take a little convincing. Three is the audience who are sat there at the moment scared out of their wits, thinking that it's going to take me an awful long time. I honestly believe if we can do a good job on driving, we'll try and convert the other two for the wider industry. The frustration from my side, if there is one, is that we want to go now. The sooner we can start this process of safely putting on these drive-in screenings, the sooner we can hand this wider audience back to the wider cinema industry. So basically, if anyone has Boris's number, have a word, because we need to get these drive-in screenings up and running in June, not July, I think, so we can hand this audience back and we can all get to the return of the big screen, which is obviously what we're all after.
Thanks, George. There's just a couple of quick questions around. I think you've answered them anyway, but people are asking around what sort of comms are you leading with in terms of, is it safety aspect or the film slate? When are the government's likely to return and allow an opening on the 4th of June? And will you look to run just classic films, or will there be an opportunity to run the films that are out for release like Tenet, etc., in the next couple of months?
Sorry, Jamie, just ask the first one again. Sorry, I missed that, mate.
Yeah, so basically, what sort of comms would you be leading with as a business that will is it going to be around safety aspect, or is it the film slate? I think you've answered a few bits around that already. And obviously the government, you're waiting for a response from the government around the start date of the 4th of June. How likely is that to happen? Well,
look, in answer to the first question, I think we've all, three other speakers as well have touched on this, that there's a real delicate touch needed here. We want to offer audiences that reassurance that they can attend safely, that social distancing will always be in place, but we mustn't strip the fun out of it. Cinema is escapism. It's why we all love it. So we have to play this one really carefully, I believe. And so with that, it's going to be around driving, mentioning social distancing, mentioning the fact that people are going to be safe when they come, but at the same time we really don't want to labour the point and strip the fun out. As I say, it's got to be something that people can easily go, yeah, that looks great fun, I know I'll be safe. And I think that this is an audience that we can turn very quickly back to a confident cinema going audience. And the theme of today is really, from hearing what everyone said, is that we're all in this together, and I think that is the point. Drive-in is part of this wider industry thing. We can convert this audience back. With regards to the films, look, at the moment we're leading with the films that we know sell best, that we've traded on for the last 12 years. That does include this year's Oscar winners and the big award winners. So in the first week of the programming, you'll see that Joker, Rocketman, Knives Out, one of Matt's films, will be there. Those films, I think there's definitely a market for, but obviously we'll lead with the classics that we've traded on most. I would love, in all honesty, this could happen, that these studios, the service that we're doing, and if we can get a new release, brilliant. We'd love it, and I know that we'd do a good job of it. So in terms of the date, look. We all watched Boris's announcement Sunday before last, hoping that there might be something more telling with regards our little corner of the industry. In truth, if it is the 4th of July, we'll be ready to go. But I know that we've got the model safely bottomed out, that we could go earlier if they give us the green light.
Cool.
Thanks, George. Thanks so much for sharing. I've just noticed the time. We're out of time. We've had our hour. And I'd just like to say a huge thank you to Hoss, Sharon, Matt, and George for sharing all those comments. That was a nice little sum up that you just said, George. We are all in this together. and listening to everyone. I think it's, and hopefully everyone listening to this session does get the sense that everyone is collaborating, and as you said, Hoss, we're playing the long game. You know, this is a marathon and not a sprint. And first and foremost, you know, we have to do what's safe for the public. But it feels that there's a great sense of agility and flexibility and creativity across the industry. And I think everyone's really looking forward to seeing, you know, the Back to Cinema campaign, Sharon, when the time's right, because I think that will be, you know, a real great boost to get everyone back into the cinema and, you know, the new normal, whatever that may be. Still lots of unknowns, and that's clear from listening for the last hour, but it does feel that there's a genuine, you know, positivity and, you know, feeling of unity across the industry, from distribution, exhibition, new fantastic formats from George, and yes, we have lots of oh, have we timed out? No, we've got lots of questions, so what we'll do is we'll follow those up after this session. Quick thanks to Jenny in the background, who's been driving it all, and thanks to Jamie for handling the questions. So I'll say goodbye now, and big thanks again to everyone for listening and to all our speakers. See you again soon, I hope.
Bye.
Thanks everyone.
Bye everyone.
Bye bye.